All right. So we're going to start with the bolster set up horizontal, the block in front, the blanket set up in a stack at the back. And then when you do, kind of lift up your body, so over that block. So I would sit in front of the block, okay? Reach your hands back to the bolster, and then the shoulders will be required to work in a direction that could be a little challenging. So you're trying to swivel the shoulder back to lift up and just lift the tailbone onto that block. And then as you lower your back pieces onto the bolster, place the block so that it is secure under the tailbone area. So you get a feeling of balance of the hips. And then find a sandbag, lift it, cross it, lower your head back to your blankets. And then once that sand is kind of oriented, eventually across, you'll get a feel that the diaphragmatic breathing element becomes a little bit more clear because of this kind of pool, the open kind of vacancy that is not vacant, right? It's the belly and the belly organs, but it doesn't have that musculature or the bone feeling, right, of the ribs. So start with walking your feet in towards your center and process the stages of lining up for stretching the intercostals. So thinking about these muscles between the ribs and creating some intercostal motion. Now moving the shoulders back, take some time and energy on getting the blankets so they're just like a balance for your brain. And the stem into the neck. Okay, hold on to the belt. Start fairly mild with your offering of strength with the belt. So you might even just hold slightly on around the belt, gripping that. And then feel what energy comes into gripping a belt. And then maybe softening that grip so it's so mild, you just kind of are barely holding on to the belt. Okay, stretch both legs down and then slide the hands out on the belt and let it be mild. So you're just kind of offering a little bit of curiosity into how the chest is suggesting a greater amount of oxygenation right into the lower lungs. So diaphragmatic breathing really means that you're breathing into those lower lungs. More oxygenation occurs there. There's a couple different science conversations on the blood level in there and so forth. But for here, we'll stay what I can acknowledge, right? My feet apart. I take them a little wider so my back can respond. And let the feet maybe turn out and relaxing your attention to enforcing a certain way you want your feet. Just let them be. And closing your eyes and gathering your attention on the even rhythm of your breath. And just preparing the mind to kind of spend time in restoring your bones, your organs, even the brain waves. So just like you're setting time aside, like you do for rest, focusing, internalizing. Now filtering the focus of the breath, just the inhale, the stages of exhalation. Does your back feel okay here? Is there pressure anywhere that's starting to intensify? If there is discomfort, the first level of change might be to bend your knees and let your feet be solid on the ground. So I want your focus to really be primarily on the respiratory tree, that rib cage, lungs, bronchial tubes, and the throat. So if your head is tilting a lot, like the chin is lifting, use the blanket for you to kind of smooth your head back so you feel that length at the brainstem, which connects the spine, right? Connects high up in towards your brain, right? Where it intersects. And the trapezius muscle, right? It actually is in this whole area. It ends up there. So at the occiput. So there is so much connection into the brain body from the structure. Okay, so a few more moments here. Let your arms relax their grip entirely and form an awareness with the upper extremities that's easygoing, that they're just stretching open. You're not trying to strain your shoulders, but you are using the props to hold your bones. We could do this pose with more height under our back, but we could add blanket on top of the bolster and another, add stack up blankets to get the ribs higher. We'll kind of play with that a little bit. Okay, so sense the motion, inhale, filling the lungs. Exhale, letting go. If the legs are lengthening down, bend the knees, slide the feet in, move the sand. And then feel that you can alternate a leg at a time, picking it up, bending it, but offer that movement of the back of the pelvis towards the thigh, into the knee, towards your chest, without the accessibility of arms to help you. So as you alternate one leg at a time lifting, I want you to work with that kind of curling action of the back of the pelvis and the movement pattern of the leg kind of squeezing in. And it doesn't need to find a kind of a resting point. In fact, there's no resting point with this perspective, is there? It's simply motion, elongating. And I don't feel like there's a place that is elongating for me in my back motion. But what you might work with is, as the leg draws in, that tail kind of drawing under. So you feel a little curl of the tailbone drawing under and lengthening. And it might feel like you get 10% of that you can access if it's a little gripped up. Okay, let's play a bit with that. So what we'll do is we'll keep on the bolster. You're gonna lower down both feet, knees bending. And then shift your knees to one side, still stay on the back, and then move your block out to the side. And then we'll take our hands onto the sides of the bolster. Actually, first things first here, we'll move our blanket, top blanket back. Your belt will still be important here. So if it gets pushed back, get a hold of it so it's on you. And then feet walking in towards your bolster, you're gonna use the weight of your brain on that blanket and then reach the handles on the side of the bolster, push them down so the bolster is under the upper back of your pelvis. And actually it feels like it's under, you've been in this before, I know, anyhow, but you wanna find as much of the compilation of your ribs and then most of your pelvis. So let's say you feel down towards where your tush is, it might feel like it's hanging off a little bit. I mean, nothing excessive where you couldn't sit down with your sitting bones, but When you lift up your legs now, right, wherever we drew the knee into the chest one at a time, now when you lift up, you're on top of something. Yeah, your leg is not, your hip is not hanging onto a block. So at this point, decide on how far down you want that bolster. I'm going to err on the side if it's a little higher. That way you're working your stomach muscles. If it's too much that you're kind of hanging on the edge and your stomach is shaking, that's just going to be too much work and you'll exhaust yourself. So you be the decider on how much you want to exhaust your core. Okay, so now take the belt and reach it under the right foot, or the right foot reaches to the belt. I don't know which is first. And buckle up. Okay. Make a loop, of course, of a substantial width, right? So I like to measure this out. So my leg is up, my left foot is down now, right leg is up. And you might want to reach your loop to the forehead. Just kind of get a reach over to the forehead with your loop. And then give it a little bit of extra length, just so your measurement is kind for your neck. So it could kind of go to the crown of your head, right? Be sure your foot is not trying to go back with you to measure that. And then you're going to bend your right knee. So that gives your belt movement towards you. And then scoop up the back of the skull here, right? So you'll get a feel for, do I want my belt looser? Maybe it's too tight. So you could scoot the buckle so it's closer to your hand, easier to loosen or tighten. And I think we've all had some experience to a level of awareness of once we get that traction, we can work with letting the head lean back, letting the head lift up, and then we can add that sand, if you like, to the very top of the left thigh, okay? So get a feel of lining up for your brain float. Okay, and get a find where the movement is for the circulation, yeah, through the hamstring. Yeah, and so if the leg is kind of waving a little side to side, it's a good pose to try to find some stillness, right? A balance of lengthening. I don't think much, pulsing is necessarily how I would want to stretch my upper spine, right? It's part of what we have to do in our daily habits, though, like when we're, doing activities, stretch your arms open, driving or cooking in the kitchen, moving your head back and forth. That's kind of the most vulnerable place of twitching movements, probably, in our spine. And the vertebrae, right, they're just a little smaller. So find where that belt is honestly supporting you. Don't force it to be too far down or too far up. And the hamstring and the sand could go to the top of the left thigh. I would use it. It definitely brightens up the right hamstring, if anything. I mean, maybe it doesn't look brighter, but it does have a little bit of intensity that pulls around the back strip of the leg. And if the back line of the leg that's up feels mostly kind of balancing and spreading from the knee, the upper back of the knee, down through the back of the upper leg. So let's not talk about just the muscle that's there, but there's other things besides a muscle that are not mentioned sometimes. So feel the resistance with your foot into the belt, and then take some care that the arms are in a place that could kind of quell the lower back. So I feel my low back slightly challenged. So deep breathing can be so helpful. Belly breath, belly body. Now, if the leg feels shocked by the position, like overwhelmed, all sensation is in one nuclear center here, you might bend the right knee a bit and let your head lean back. Just kind of survey the situation. We'll do a little bit of a survey on this right leg. Or we could call it service work for the leg. Okay, now let the belt be moved here. So hold the back of your head gently with your hands. Slide the belt up. Get a hold. Okay, and then I want you to get the belt. You can leave your sand on for however long it remains, you know, naturally if you're using that. But promote the flesh of the bottom of the right foot so that you kind of stir up the lower leg when you flex that foot. And it might feel like there's stages of grief for this leg. But when we have this motion of pulling, even though our arms just kind of have one motion, it doesn't look like they're pumping, they're just still, the leg can experience some stages of circulation. Okay, so let's take the belt together with the left hand. Okay, so you want to cross, we're going to cross this right leg so you can let your sand, I'm just going to push mine off because it'll be distracting me. But you're going to cross that right leg over to the left. And as that leg is crossing, can you keep the resistance with that left? I mean, this is a little tricky with how you corner your resistance layer. So I'm holding the belt with the left hand. My right leg is, you know, connected into that position by the foot. So if I put my right hand on my right outer leg, I want to notice there's resistance here. Right? There is some challenge embedded, right, in the whole muscular, you know, it kind of penetrates into the muscle, the crossover. So can you work on letting the left leg get real limp so the lower leg is passive? It stops trying to be part of the pose. And then maybe you let your right hand stay closer to your right hip bone. You don't have to be massaging it, but just connecting, touching. And then persuade that hip so it reaches downwards. You know, you're rotating that hip, just the whole ball of it, the ball and socket. But it just has motion down. You're not trying to grip it and force. It's just an energy of it going down versus tightening up and pulling up into the back. Just be aware of that direction. And then bend the right knee. Okay. What we'll do is we'll just slip the belt out of the foot or the foot out of the belt, and then bring your left knee up, bring your right foot to the left knee. And I think coming down with the left foot might be a better alternative after what we just did there. And then just feeling this reclining leg hook, right? Your foot hook. Never call it that, but reclining foot hook. How about that? All right. So the ribs are certainly suspended up. And feel that right inner thigh easing open. Okay, just take a moment here. I know we've done this before, pulling our legs in, but that's not going to be the option, hopefully, if you need to do that, of course. You're free to do what you want and take what works for you. Okay, so the buttocks might feel like they're a little bit off kilter. They're not exactly even in their experience in the moment. So let's take our belt, bring the right knee up, get the belt loop. Doesn't have to be perfectly just the loop, but you're going to hook the right foot into that belt again, lift up the right leg, bring the left knee in towards your left hand, and then opening out the adductors, the inner legs, open. So they externally rotate out. And hopefully you have a little space on the right side if you're against the wall. it's kind of nice because it keeps it a mild stretch. Can't overdo it. But consider some benefit to that. But you're basically placing the hip joint, right, in a perspective of flexibility. Just see if it's gripped up. And this might be something you feel kind of neutral about. Maybe it's a little bit of an adductor intensity. There's a lot of lymph nodes, right, in the groins, leg pits, armpits, lymph, these lymph node high load areas that we're working with stimulating. Slow breath. With the eyes closed. Just enjoy the holding of that belt, the releasing of the left hand on the left leg, left foot down. And then as the right leg is helped back to center, use your belt as like a helper, like you're the assistant to your leg. And then once that leg is lifting, can you flex through the foot? You're going to keep using the belt. And then get a hold of the belt with both hands, open it out, and left foot comes up. You're in a loop, right? You got a loop still, right foot goes down. Reach that loop to the back of your head. And if the second side, you start to notice that there is some relation, with some tension building, then you might want to be of service to the side and maybe loosen it up. But if you do choose that, just be a little cautious that you're holding the back of your head and kind of also finding how to be gentle with that transition. Okay, you're pretty safe, right? You're on the ground, you're not going to fall any high height, but it is the sensitivity of the neck and the skull is so thick, right? That affecting some of these smaller spaces might take you some minutes to get into. So as soon as you have that foot and the connection to the brain, to the center, the shelf at the back of your head, lower the right leg. Add sand if you like. Now the sand can go straight down. It can be a little bit kind of lopsided on the leg, so you could kind of turn it. So if you get a feeling when you're turning that leg, so get a feeling. Welcome, Jess. Hope you're getting into the room okay there.
Hi, thank you.
Okay. It's still an active experience, even though you feel like we're all in the space, and you never know. Okay, it looks like we're all there, muted and everything. Okay, so let's see, what leg are we on here? Everybody's on left leg up, am I right? Put a thumb up if that's it. Okay, Fly, thank you. All right, amazing how quickly you can get shifted, disoriented. Okay, especially the slow stuff. So I've got the weight on the leg, and I find that if I have a sandbag or a bag of rice or something, that offers a little bit more intensity through the back line of the left leg. But, this level of moving your head back, can be a little overdone sometimes. So use the traction of the belt at the back of your head. Make sure it's firm, it's not sliding out. This is key. And the right foot is relaxed. Let's just let it be. The left foot has so much direction and intensity, it's not going to flip out. I hope not. Give a few more moments in brain flow. So one of our perspectives here is, pretty mellow, right? You've got some direct intent into the left hamstring and the right quadricep, but it's that traction of the cervical vertebrae. So it doesn't have the ability to kind of twitch side to side as much as it does during most of our day, that kind of vulnerable cervical situation. So as we continue, right, this is, like I mentioned, kind of an interesting array and medley of movements today. Okay, so feeling the level of awareness when you let your hands reach up to the belt. You're going to get a hold of the belt to where it's connected to the back of your head. And then I would just slide the belt up and let your head release down to the blanket. And then as you hold the belt with your right hand, go right into this side. Let's just keep it motioning. So we'll cross the left leg to the right. It seemed like last time we were really slow getting there. So when we crossed over, now we're crossing to the right side with the left leg. This left hip, you want to feel like this, it's kind of like a big log, and it kind of reaches down from this motionary intercostal base that we started with, the intercostals in motion. So in this left log, we'll call it today, it has its roots and it has quite a bit of experience by the hold of the belt, right? So you can bend your left knee, you can reach through the heel, you could kind of twitch through that position. But let's just give a try here where the left arm is open and the ribs are trying to kind of flare. So you don't want to have one that's really dropping the back right rib. Get a feel that they're both expressive, that the shoulders are back and down. I like the one blanket for this. Some people like to stack up a couple. Just be careful that the neck doesn't get too much flexion. Okay, and then bend through that left knee. We'll take that hook one more time. So we'll slide the right foot on the floor in, and we'll hook the left ankle to that. Actually, you know what? You could probably keep your belt still kind of snagged on the foot for this. This might be a better option. And I can feel this through the inner leg a tiny bit. But when you hold on to that, well, actually, you don't have to hold the belt. You can just keep it somewhere there. But you continue the awareness of this adductor. And I'm doing this pattern for sciatic stuff. This little sequence is mingled in our set. But get the feel of that knee motioned out. It's not really twitching much, it's just steady. And your right foot, if you slide it down or if you slide it back up, it'll affect the grade of intensity on this left leg. So I imagine some of these areas nerve-wise on this left leg are really pretty boggy and sensitive to these shifts. So find one where it feels sort of kind of plain, right? It's not too interactive. It's feeling like a stretch that you can tolerate. And then get the belt with your hand. Get it under that left foot. So I try to start with this platform of the hip bones are open. There's space at the front of the hip. Not outer space, but inner space. Hold the belt with the left hand. And this left foot has already been told, well, you can be open if you want, so the foot has this openness. And then it's tricky when I engage this left thigh, the knee picks up, and then I start to move the left leg out. I don't know, my foot is on the screen. And then the right knee is lifted and opened as well. So it's that adductor flush. The challenge here, since I don't have a wall to stop me, is that you might get a little too much with the left leg stretching. So use the right leg as your guide of intensity. Right? So if it's moved out, and it's moving, and it stops because it can't go much more when it's bent. It probably couldn't go much more if it was straight either. You know, unless you're Gumby, right? Maybe so. But you've got some muscles that are going to hold back and some blood flow that's trying to catch up. So give a few more moments here. This one can kind of pull in the shoulders, I find a bit. So your work with bending your left elbow is important. I'll remember some of our ideas with shoulders coming up too, getting those worked on and maneuver through our shoulders. Okay. So try to keep the left leg straight-ish. As you bring it up to the center and up to the ceiling, it's resisting probably. And then bring both feet up into the belt. Now we got both feet, so we don't have to figure out what side we're on. And then we'll slide the feet out. And you know, if you got it in a loop, it's connected. You don't have to hold on anymore. You can just let the legs kind of feel how the knees roll in, the knees roll out. This is a good thing. One to just explore, oh, these are my legs, these are my extremities. And this is what it's about when I get upside down, is I want to use the extremity lift to move the blood from my extremities to my heart, to my vital organs, to my lungs. You know, all that circulation moves up to the brain. So we invert. Bend your knees. Now we'll get a little more serious about it. We'll slide the feet together in the belt. And then as you bend the knees greater and then take off the belt, you're going to add your bag of either sand, rice, rocks, pebbles, whatever you got for weight. And ensure that your back is still on whatever you're using for a bolster. You know, you want to make sure that it's really piled up there. You got the lift, you've got the lumbar arch, and then sand goes on the bottoms of the feet, and the legs have their lift. Yep. And this is kind of the finale of this little segment too. So I want you to experience that path of flexing. There's lots of flexing internally right now. Instead of going through each of those points and checking the box, explore where the feet have sensation, the flexing enough, not too much. Maybe let the weight of the sand be your guide on that positioning pressure. Right, that's tricky. Like some of us will kind of play with the sand and move it closer to the toes. Some will just, you know, I generally keep it in one spot. Don't get too adventuresome with the sand options, but I know some of you will use 2 sandbags. But when you do, go with verticality. So just simply straight up, not trying to let the legs flow back. Straight up. Hands are going to hold on to the belt. I would take your belt so that you measure it. And if you got it, you can buckle it up. And you're going to cinch up the belt so it's about a little wider than shoulder width. This is a perfect measurement moment because you got your belt near your shoulders here. Okay, it might feel a little bit small, but it's just about a little wider than shoulder width, so be kind to your shoulders. And then slip your hands into that loop. Yep, and it's for the wrist, so you don't have to worry about your fingers getting tightened up and tired. And then when you move your arms back overhead, as long as your sand is secure, your weight on your feet, and you don't need your hands to help you out if there's an emergency, then this is an okay moment. But I have the arms in that reach overhead. My head nods a little side to side, just enough to try to get the side stem of the neck to loosen. Good. And then feel all these interesting waves of, you know, concentration through leg muscles. And then the shoulders are like a different world as far as reaction sometimes, I find, with the rotator cuff. And if you can't do the one with the arms, this belt part, you don't have to. You can pass on it and let your arms move open and relax. You choose. Just going to add some things in here and there for shoulders today. Okay, flexing the feet just a tiny bit more, and meaning not more time, but activate that flex, toes towards you. The legs are a little bit apart, right? You want the knees not touching. So if your musculature doesn't convey that and they're kind of knocking towards each other, it looks like an X, then work on the tailbone pressing a little bit into your bolster, the abdomen moving and spreading naturally with the breath. And maybe that separation will be a little more natural. Okay. Now slide your hands out of that belt, cross the right arm over upper chest so that you're stretching your right deltoid. You might be able to feel that through the upper arm. And then switch to the other side. Yeah, I can feel that into the shoulder. Into the deltoid, you know, you're might get a little bit full sometimes. And it spreads the back. So giving yourself a big hug is usually a good idea, right? Because you can spread out those blades. Okay, and if you're giving yourself a hug, take a moment to give yourself a hug. Okay, bend the knees at the same time. Okay, and then uncross and moving the sand. We're gonna make this kind of a blend of coordination. So the knees can go side to side. I think it's a healthy warm up for your spine to do this kind of movement before you move off the bolster. So because we're going to be using movement as our traction to get out of this position gracefully, let the knees go side to side, kind of windshield wiper. It doesn't need to be any especially unique dance of sides, but you'll roll to your left and then slide down, and then we're up, we're sort of up. So we're going to shift onto our left hip, and I have a very sore left arm. I'm recovering from my second shingles vaccination. So it's so sore. Yikes. But I got it done, so that's good. Okay, so what you're gonna have is a bolster or whatever you have. If you got a firm pillow or couch, you know, pillow, those work really good for this if you're ever without a bolster. Couch cushions. So then you got a couple of blankets, you got a block overhead, something, or maybe a stool works out good. If you've got one of these kind of massage balls or a Nerf or something, you can use that. If you have nothing like this, you can also use a block instead for a lot of these poses coming up that have this ball option. So you put the ball, we don't use it that much, but you use it on the inside of the right leg so it's a spacer to balance the hip. So if you've been doing it like this and your knee turns in, and you can, it doesn't hurt, you know. Many people do that just because it's less to do, I guess. But if you look at the alignment, well, this is going to help line the hip. So it just looks better. It may not. Maybe you could do nothing, but it might be an improvement. And then when you stack on that weight on the side of the leg, well, then that's going to add. So it could be here with your sand. It could be up here with your ribs. And I want you to lie your head onto the blanket. So you're on your side sage pose. And as you reach, it's purely about the whole side realm. Okay? So there's no necessity to get into the exact points of the pose, right? That, oh, it looks like she has her knee, the left knee is moving up to the bolster, left arm is between the bolster and the blankets. head is on the blankets, right arm stretches over to the block. Yes, that could be your pose, but you could also do a little bit of self exploration, right? Get a feel of the counter spin of the chest. The left arm is relaxed, even though I'm touching with my left hand to my pec muscles. But I want you to get that direction of opening. These can get so pinched up, or you don't know they're pinched until you try to spread out through the collarbones. Relax the throat, the thyroid, swallow. And doing some swallow practice without things going through besides your actual tissues, right? And whatever moisture is in there already. But meaning without, the only time you do that is when you're drinking or eating. So swallowing and kind of massaging in that area. Okay, so the arm could be anywhere. If your arm is tired, let the right arm relax on the side. But if you can, let the arm be reaching to the block. And you can maintain the side motion. Take a few moments. Let the weight of your left side from your shoulder down into the hip. And I would notice some of the areas that feel some length and some that feel some squish, some compression. Take a few slow, deep motions of breath. Now, I think that nice final emphasis here would be the left hip. So that hip, even though you seem to have it down, it might have some mystery clenching. Just kind of happens through the left hip. Occasionally, like if I'm trying to keep the body in this slight twist, there's a few things that I'm working on accessing in the ribs, equilibrium in the breathing muscles. So let's tap a little bit into that potential. And we have half of the leg part, so we've got this one half working into this connection. So let the sand move off. Going to, at some point, we're going to take Supta Baddha Konasana, and most of you have that kind of imprint in your brain. You'll know where we're going. But when you roll into your left side, come up, get the block from behind you, bring it forward, pull the blankets in just a little bit. Maybe you don't need to do much of that. That could be overrated, but turn the bolster so it's tipped up on the blankets. And then when you come back center, you might do a little kind of windshield wiper here with the legs. You might adjust your stuff here and kind of get centered. But when your knees shift side to side, feel this motion of the shoulders back. The neck is in such a funny spot here for the position. It's like, it's essentially you have your head on top there, but it is in a funny space to get things loosened. So you're going to slide your feet in, sit right next to the bolster. You got to have your sacrum right on that edge, and then blocks under the legs. Be generous, use them. Even if you're a block-free person on this pose, just use it to protect your anterior your sacral ligament. So when you take your belt, you're going to loosen up and make a big loop. It's barely enough to hold me there. And let's bring the loop over the tops of the feet, slide the buckle so it's near a hip. And then once the belt is kind of loosened back at the eyebrows of the buttocks, kind of the perfect explanation of where is my belt. I'm not quite sitting on it, but it's sure, and it ain't on my spine. Okay. And resist with your feet. Let them push forward. I know that your right leg has got a little different sensitivity than the left because you were just on your left side. Your right leg had more, pull to it with an energy with the sand. So try your best to equalize that pressure forward. I'm going to pop my blocks a little higher. It seems like that'll be cozy. And then when you lower back, I want you to have your sand on your feet. Okay, so forward on the feet if you have any bags of weight. And that might affect your knee and your hip here. But when you lower back, you're going to take the rib space. That feels kind of lofty in the ribs. Yeah, we normally maybe use a blanket on top for this position. So we have some variety with blanket options. But sometimes it's nice to use your shoulders as your guide to open up the chest, okay? They may not feel like they have a lot to do with opening your chest, but they can be a huge help to your back muscles. How do you get your shoulders back? So if there's a lot of pressure in the mid-ridge of the back, I want you to let your spine center, let your arms relax beside you, but close to you. And then as your eyes can close, if that's comfortable, you want to experience where the abdomen, even though you might think abdomen, the abdomen, the belly, body, much of it free of bones, right? It's got organs and a swirl of movement with breath. You can always lower your blocks down. If you decide this feels too plain, there's not enough energy cycle of flexibility that you can sense. And sometimes using the props to hold the body in therapeutic poses is good enough, right? So I'm finding that awareness of simplicity, creating balance for each hip. And most importantly, let the hands relax, the elbows heavy. If you have been able to get your elbows on the ground and they're down, which is not everyone can find that, right? And if it's a challenge for you, you can always put something under your arms. But some of you might be surprised that that's even possibly challenging, but it takes a certain amount of rib opening and breathing capacity to get your elbows down. So take the last few moments of this, getting your shoulder blades kind of reaching back into that bolster. Yeah, there's a little bit of a lift with the head, right? Not necessarily lifting it off the blanket, or the bolster, but you might feel the chin lifted, right? So just relax your head on however it's tilted or shifted, accepting where it's at is fine. Not having to force it. Okay, so let's unbuckle. Bring the knees to point up, slide the feet away from that sand. Bring the right foot to the left knee. We've done this before today already. We had that on our back, right? We did that. But this time you'll take your ball or a block besides the outer left hip, but it's really high up and it's attached right at the greater trochanter. So you do have the ball at the top of the outer left hip, or a block or a sandbag, right? That might be smoother. And then tilt the body weight onto that ball. If anything's kind of in your way that you're not using right next to your left hip, then move it away. But you're going to shift, so you hold the right knee with the left hand, and you're pulling that leg. The knee stays bent. Everything is more in a crease position from the hip joint to the knee. It's bending at the knee. And then it just kind of sways down to the foot. Let's take about 10 more seconds here. So just very kind of vigorous hold with the left hand. Kind of penetrate that circulation into the hip. Breathing, right arm is passive, just the being group. It's the BG group, the being group. Okay, let go with the hand and swap sides. Right foot down, left foot up to the right knee. We're trying to go kind of quickly through this little piece. Ball to the right buttock, outer buttock, hip. And so I say it could be any of those areas, but you could put the ball so it's at the very top connection to the pelvis. And you kind of smush the ball in. All right. Some of those videos I made for that YouTube channel are called Smush-a-Ball, right? And it's all about massaging on the ball. So I thought Smush-a-Ball was a good title. And this is the same, right? You push in the ball and then your leg is kind of pushing onto it, but the right hand holds the left knee. And be careful, right? You don't want to be screaming in the position, but you might feel quite a bit, especially since we're going to leave this one to the next side stage. So this left hip might be sensitive to the pulling of your right hand. Things you do to help your body loosen up its holding patterns, huh? Yeah. And these areas might take a little longer to have a reduction, right, of that sensitivity. So some of us might tend to kind of hold the knee and shake it around. I'm just trying to get some release in the hip. But give it some time. Some of us have, but give it a little time in the shape. Release your grip with the right hand. And then we'll make this, a little bit intermediate coordinated activity here. But when you come back center with the leg pattern, left knee open, move the ball. See if we can sneak this one. We're going to uncross to the left foot. We're going to roll to the right and then place the ball on the inside of the left leg. Get your sand. Turn your bolster. We've almost forgotten that. We used to do side stage this way though. And then our shoulders got older. We decided, let's make it a little bit more realistic for a shoulder aging. Okay, so you can, right? If you want to turn the bolster lengthwise, you can have that underneath your side spine. But this way, we all can join in. Everybody can participate. So you have the ball on the inside of the left leg. But when you're at home Zoom practice, you can participate as much as you want. Take breaks when you need. Okay, so you might find that if you roll on the back of your head in this pose, you need your blankets a little higher, right? So if that's the case, you could add things. And at home, you might even grab like a beach towel, or if you have another blanket, just have a good amount of props around for the fun of it. But when you reach that left arm over towards the space behind you, there might be a block that you've added. But, scramble around to get your props. Don't get too worried if you have the perfect path of support. Part of it's using the props under you for this one to line up the supportive kind of balance beam, right? So, get the feel for where the sand works for you. Not all of us want the sand here on the side. It might be hard to keep balanced, but it is kind of interesting to persuade the sand to be on a spot. And then of course, sand has this kind of interstitial kind of movement, right? It's not necessarily still once it lands. So when you're breathing, you could feel that interchange of focus. At least it's weight on you. And trust is a big part of this final piece right here before we get up and have a little more motion on hands and knees, because you have to trust that your props are really supporting you. If you don't agree with that, you need to change your arm position, maybe open. Let that be, right? Let the arm release. It's okay to change things up with the limbs. The lower limbs are a bit trickier, aren't they? The right leg could bend enough so that you almost do like a scissor kick. That some people like to do that. Again, I'm keeping it pretty basic. Okay. Good. Relax the weight of the head. You might forget that it's fairly heavy. But a lot of muscles, right, grip up just for you to kind of freely move the brain around, if you would call it that, or you call it your head, whatever you call what movement is above the neck. Okay, now we have this side sheath, right? Our side body length, lateral, okay? So we're gonna move kind of, in some way, we're moving out of the lateral, front side, back side. We're gonna kind of let it all go in towards kind of this hybrid pattern here. So when your arm, maybe your left arm opens, maybe you like to keep it straight back and then roll to the right. But you choose sometimes making an openness, like a full counter spin with the armpit chest. And then reach your left arm over to the right and try to let your sand is gonna fall. It's not too shocking, right? But when you come out and you lift up, you're gonna take your sand off to the side, okay? And then move your bolster to the side. Actually, we're gonna use it, I think. So take a blanket in, one only, and then start to establish. You need to kind of roll out your shoulders. Let's get that going first. Let's get onto the knees on the one blanket and take a, let's keep our bolster off of the mat for a second. We'll do a shoulder. Oops, sorry. This could be loud in the recording. Okay, so right arm forward, smack dab kind of in the middle of your mat would be good. Knees on blanket, and reach the left arm under the right and let the hips reach back so your head it's leaning to your right arm, okay? So if you can't really see my right arm, I'm on the ground with the right arm. Of course, left arm swings under, okay? But you get this reach out of your back. And dynamic is really, it's almost kind of this, it's the same as we just did when we were on our side stage with right arm under, right? Swung under. So if you kind of back up your whole pattern and go back in the recording, you'll see, oh, that's like kind of the same, but backwards, I guess, right? Because the last moment we have the right arm under, left arm over. So stretch out through your shoulder. Okay. Now, when you come back up, take a block, place it down wide on your mat. Block is wide, flat, down the mat, elbows down, hands hold the block. And now lift up your hips. I know it's a little bit of a shoulder purge here. So elbows, of course, are down. Head is maybe touching the ground because it's so much shoulder opening. Breathe. It only helps. Okay. And be amazed that you still try these things even on your own at home. Lower your knees and change the arm crossing. Move that. Block a little bit, left arm forward, right arm slides under. So my arm is navigating kind of in the same track of my armpit. But since that armpit area is so up, right? So high up. It's not as if you're trying to get your armpit to touch your right arm. I can't get mine to, personally. I could probably finagle it, but I'm working on my left shoulder here. Give it some shoulder motion. Okay, let your head lower. See if your head can kind of touch to the left arm. Breathing. You know, the right hand might be kind of limp, right? It doesn't feel like it can push. So when you slide your left hand back, you're going to get your bolster and slide it across your mat so it's horizontal. And then hands, shoulder width, palms open, spread the fingers, round your back into cat pose. Chin to chest. And now, if you can keep your arms about there, you're going to lower down your hips on the bolster and let the hips kind of rest into the bolster. We'll have a little more direction with the hip in a moment, but find that connectivity of the front rim of the pelvis. Okay, I find this one to be, I can assemble myself here, but it's the coordinated patterns back and forth that are a little bit curious to if they're helping my, my hips out. So just get that feel there. And instead of trying to kind of like grip up your glutes, kind of tighten your buttocks, I want you to feel the front of the hips lengthening. Okay. Now, hands have to push so actively to help you back. So feel the balance. Now, when you come back, your hips are going to grip internally to come back. So I want you to shift your hips back, table, round your back into cat. And then turn your bolster, I guess at the same time, I'm asking, turn your bolster straight forward so it's spine-wise. And push the bolster back so it's touching to your blanket, okay? Just touching it. Lean forward again, just like you did a moment ago, but now there's a little more bolster there, okay? And then lower down your rib layers. Try to get a little lift of the chest muscles up. A little bit of a locust pose. Huge fan of this pose, even though I don't like to do it, but I do know that it's very strengthening for my back muscles and my heart, right? It's a good lung pressure position. So breathing. Now your hands can be kind of quasi-pressed. They don't have to be fully impressionable and making prints. But feel if you can keep your chest going a little bit up when you lower your elbows down. I imagine length of arms would be a real difference on this one. Like if you get really long ones, it will feel a little easier, but short could be tricky. So when you have your fingers open, this does put a little number on the chest muscles to strengthen. So I want you to let your elbows really press and try to make a little more imprint from the elbows to the hands. And then tilt your head down so your chin moves towards your chest, just like you did in cat pose, but you can't, well, you don't need to do any movement with your stomach muscles. They're already in play here. Okay. Now the knees are apart, right? You can be pretty comfy with that. Just let them be cozy. You don't have to pull them back in or try to make focus with your knees different. But feel when you slide your hands back, so the elbows are closer to your sides. And feel how you slide the hands back forward into Sphinx pose. Okay, now slide the hands back so they're under the shoulders. Feel if you can bring your hands out a little wider on your mat, which means your pinkies might be off the mat. And then you're going to push to lift up. So my hands are wider than before when I got to lift into my up dog. Maintain the up dog for a few breaths here. See if you can be really kind of focal on the simplicity of this direction. let's say your wrist start to feel this, your thumb, that whole area starts to radiate with pressure. Then I want you to work on bending your elbows. Okay, and that will bring more into your back, I know, than a back strengthening. But feel if there's anything you can change with your hands. Maybe you turn your fingers out so the hand is turned out like seal. Maybe that's better for your hands, so your wrists. So be a little attentive to if your wrists do feel this and your arms have a little bit of a shake, then turn them out. Okay, the hands out. Okay. I have mine turned out. This feels better on my wrist. But it is a little shaky sometimes up in the shoulder bone. It's funny how there's little particles of the shoulder muscles that are dormant, right? Like that some of your arm muscles just don't get a lot going on and then they fatigue and hurt. Okay, so toes under, head center down, knees kind of scoop in, and then when you come back to hands, knees, lift up the knees, and I want you to go right into walking back to Uttanasana, standing forward bend. Scoot the feet forward. If you want to add this element of walking the toes up on the blanket, and then the heels are just off the edge of the blanket, this can be kind of nice for the calves. It's not always best practice, but you might find that a few moments of this calf indulgence works for you. You can have your hands relaxing or holding your elbows, or this is what I'm good to go with. I'll have my bolster up and do my calf stretch for, about 30 seconds with the bolster up. And just get a feel of my head between my arms, if it will fit. Seems to be a pretty good fit. Yeah, some of your parts probably have a rather relative orientation to each other naturally. They just don't hang out this way all the time. And then as you feel the movement into the ribs, those of you that have the bolster up, start to lower it down. And then if you're on the blanket, walk your feet back off the blanket. So the feet are solely spreading out, a little wider than hips distance, parallel but wider than hips distance. And then as you lower down, you are aiming to get your head as far down as it will go with natural range of motion. Okay, feet are wide though, it's a wide stance. And then you can hold the elbows, you can dangle the arms, do whichever feels comfortable, only the comfortable. I know the hamstrings might be feeling it, and that might not be relaxation, but sense the involvement of circulation kind of induced through your system. Let your head nod, whether your arms are dangling or you're holding your elbows, head nods a little side to side. And maybe you change sides with the hand holding to the elbows. Okay, let go, let the knees bend, and scooting the feet closer, walk the hands on forward. And let's take a step with the right foot to the right side of your mat, lower the left knee, and use the bolster or whatever you have here as a thick cushion under the left thigh. So I'm going to try to get my blanket a titch back so there's a little more opportunity to let this flesh of my left thigh stretch. And my knee is a little bit of a challenge on the right side that I don't want it to poke forward, but it can poke out. And so it's external rotation. So the actual stance is I'm on my knee, my right foot steps out to the right kind of side of the mat. It might be on your mat, it might be a little bit off. Most of us have a fairly decent length of our legs, so mine might be on the mat, yours might be off, but you're still normal. Okay, So operate on a pattern of arm straight, if possible. Okay. So my left thigh is not as much on my bolster as I anticipate every moment it is. So I'm trying to get it to blend. This is a good one for the quads. The whole reach. We are going to do pigeon today, so we're going to let this be kind of the lead into it. A little different than we've done for a while. Don't remember the last time we did it this way. Can't even find it in the notes, so let's do it again. Okay, now when you step the right foot back, it might take you a little bit of coordinating to get the back into center, and then the left foot steps out. We're going to do as much symmetrical balancing on these not symmetrical pose patterns, right? So I want you to just go one side to the next. Not a lot of fluff in between. So right thigh is on the bolster. Maybe it's for some of us easier than others. If you want to have your blanket on top of your bolster, sometimes that will make it a little more impactful on the hip. You know, if that's a little curious for you, you would just put the blanket across it, just like that. It's so easy, but it just pushes back more into the hip. So sometimes it's nice feeling and sometimes it's a little bit, well, pushy. So you decide how much space you want around the hip joint. Okay, now let's feel where this left pigeon's going to go. So we have our left foot turned out. We know this is kind of the spatial awareness of the pose. This will be the third time we let the leg go this way today. So it's going to be kind of a full cycle in this final stage. So what I want you to do is move. I want you to have a couple blankets underneath your seat on this one. So maybe you'll add them when you get here, but you're going to push the bolster forward, walk the left foot to the right side of your mat, toe heel, left foot to the right. And then you'll stretch back so you're on the blanket. Yep, left hip is coming on the blanket, bolsters forward, and then you can lower down the bolster this way. I prefer the bolster across because I feel like I'm going to fall over with the bolster so narrow. And then as you're reaching this left knee pointing out, we know that getting in this pose this way is different for our foot angle. Most of us will find that this left foot trying to go up, it'll slide back. So spend the moment on feeling the perch of the left sitting bone on the blanket, and then feel how you balance that with tipping forward onto your elbows and then letting the head lower down. Okay, so there's no sand involved, and you can feel that motion of the breath, and the body has kind of had a tumultuous, few pose patterns that have been linked together in the last minute and a half. So give it some time to find a minute here to group into the left inner thigh and hip. It's a good pose. There's not many that can get the hip this way. Exactly like this. The one when we're on our back with the same shape, holding the knee. There's some places that it connects to, but every one of these has a different kind of mark internally. So now if the back arch is pressurized around the hip markers, right? You don't feel like the central spine that you feel on the sides. You just kind of notice, how would you move your ribs forward here? You don't have to do it, but you can think about it. And then let's swap sides here. So we're going to lean to left hip, and you're not going to come back and up. We're going to just simply sit to the blanket and then bring the right leg forward, knees out, and left leg stretches back. Okay. Kapotasana, pigeon. So the right knee is open. This is kind of a fun way to get into it when you're kind of a little tilted into your blanket. I like the two blankets for this. And then when the right hip is kind of a little bit in that pinched pattern, You want to figure out how the lift, right, or as you get to sleeping pigeon, how you process the movement of the reaching torso and the weight into the hip, right? It's almost as if it has this kind of little grindy etching into your hip tissue. So you want to find what is the right way. Do I need to swerve a little left? Do I need to swerve a little right? That doesn't feel too good. So I want to find the balance in between so that I stretch my left side into my psoas. So I also get this hip flexor stretch on my left leg. So I sometimes like the suspended lift on this, just to get that core. But when you come down, you can always, awareness can still lead into the weight, into the right hip. And then maybe closing your eyes. No requirement, but feeling where the weight is sinking into the legs and to the arms. Now, with that kind of pool of optimal circulation kind of spooled in one hip to the next, let's kind of sway through the whole legging, right? So we're going to emphasize in the very end here, kind of the final spinal sweep through the buttock central, right, or the glute medius, and then around, wrapping to the lateral part of the hip into the leg, the IT band. So tilt to your right hip. We're going to stay grounded. No jumping jacks. Okay. So all you're going to need is your left leg. Got it. Left leg. And then take your bolster to the right side of your mat. And shift forward. Push a blanket back. You'll need that for the last pose, so don't toss it across or go and put it in the closet. And then you're going to take actually, you know what I like to do is to put my blanket on top of my bolster for this one. So that's just me, but you might put your blanket on top of your bolster on the right side of your mat, right leg down, left leg crosses over. Okay, so feel how you are able to go from that pigeon pattern, and then we're kind of rolling on the outskirts of the hip. And if you have a ball, you definitely want the ball for the sacrum. So you tuck it in around the sacrum. If you don't have a ball, don't worry about it. You'll still have a good time. But then you add your sand to the outer left hip. And with that balance, that's it. No other props are needed. That's a mouthful. And so with this left leg open across, right, left leg going across into the hip segment, it is kind of an opening, but it's also a stabilizing position. So kind of notice the arms spread out. Kind of play with how is your blanket going to help you under your head. Turn your head to the left and go in. Let these spinal poses really pour into you. So you'll feel the subtle, you'll feel the intensity. And gather your attention on slow motion of breath. Relaxing the back of the heart. Now letting that sand be on the side of the leg, so it's kind of a coat of circulation, but it's not required that you're trying to yank the left leg farther over. So give it a final few moments with this crossover on the left hip. And I want you to kind of be a little curious about the right leg. So bend the right leg, so it's like your right foot is about ready to reach towards your buttock, right? So it kind of swoops under. Some of you might remember the yin yoga pose, cat holding its tail. It's one of the poses in their layers of movement sequences. But you know, you could reach down towards that foot with your left hand. That could be an interesting wrap around for the position. It's slightly intense for the right quad. And you can always make it more and more and more interesting, cat holding its tail. But then as that gets kind of never ending, right, you let go. And then when you do make the switcheroo, try to keep this mid compilation kind of shrink wrap. So I don't want you to try to splay it out and do too much shake out, so that it doesn't get into shock, right? So you're gonna take the ball out. If anything, what you might try is be on your back, center your feet in your buttocks. You can get your bolster, and maybe it's easy enough for you to drag it across or kick it across, maybe. But once it's on the left side, you're gonna scoot yourself to the right side of your mat, left leg down, right leg crosses to the bolster. And then again, you might be rolling a little bit on the back of your pelvis to get the ball to the sacrum area. It doesn't have to be right on the spot, but you'll find an area it kind of pricks onto your clothing and then it holds. And then you got a little spacer for your back. And it's for your back anchor. And then add that sand. Now this one I'm doing a little bit more side leaning down. So not as higher lift on the side, like it's not pulling my back as much. I'm just kind of being curious how this easier going crossover might work with my body. So less information going in of intensity, more just simple. Yeah, so final pose here. We'll do one more symmetrical pose, but get a feel of the crossover of the leg. The head turns, the sand is on. The right arm is open. And anything goes with that left hand. You could rest it on your body to feel the breath in your hands or your hand. Feel that appeal of motion and life force. And the lower lungs. Now, anything that's a little bit holding, gripping, see if you can let the left hip base release. Right hip feels that crossover link into the back chain. So with these sweeping patterns through the side beam, the lateral appeal, and if you like this lateral sense in the leg and you want to stay with it, you can stay a little longer. Those of you that feel like you're ready to shift, take a moment to move the ball and then the sand and roll to the left and use your hands to help you come back up and take a bolster on top of a couple blocks to get the back to ease into balance. This is important at the end, that we either have legs up the wall, or we do chair shoulder stand, or we go into bolster bench, Stonehenge. So join me with getting your bolster on top of a couple blocks, and then sliding yourself towards the bolster and lowering back, and then getting your wits around just that simplicity of the centered hipsa, and the sand. Maybe you like to end with sand on the ribs. Maybe you like sand from the heart down to the belly, so you feel kind of that altar spine in the front of you, the front of your spine. And maybe you like the sand on your shins. I know some people have a couple sandbags and they'll use one on the shins, one on the rib cage. But however you decided, let the breath be felt with the resistance of the weight. If you're not using sand, you can put your hands on your core and feel that resistance with the breath. And feeling it in your hands can be nice, can seem kind of unreasonable to try for, but it is an interesting experience just to witness that awareness. And then the arms wherever you're comfortable, shoulders centered back, head heavy, and letting your eyes have a feeling of sinking and letting go. Gather your attention on its even rhythm. And not only feeling the stretch of the muscles between the ribs, but feeling that ease at the heart and the lungs and the nervous system settling. Next deep breath, feel the belly motion. So that's the diaphragm movement down. Abdomen expands, so it's the lower lungs. And then as you exhale, it can come pretty quickly and so comfortably, right? When you exhale and the diaphragm actually moves back up and settles at the base of the heart. So continue that kind of idea of belly breathing from time to time, the diaphragmatic strengthening. Even if you get caught breathing in the upper chest, see if you can come back down to that kind of cleaner sense of focus on the breathing muscles. And now we take away any sand. If you have that intra-abdominal pressure from the sand on the core, just move it away. Let the belly soften. And be aware here of the feet. So if you still have sand on your shins, you can just let the feet circle, rotate from just the plate of the foot, the heel plate, spreading around through the base of the foot around the toes. And they kind of take up a lot of energy in our feet, right? The toes, even though we might not recognize that when they're in boxes during the day. Their feet in little boxes. So spread them out. And then let the hips be heavy when you slide one foot at a time up on the bolster bench. And then get a hold of the legs with your arms to pull them in. So feel that looseness of the back, rocking side to side. And even if the back feels brick-like, You want to rotate even with your shoulders side to side and then go all the way into a pile. Come on up. All right. And then find a seat on a blanket or nothing. Just your seat itself is enough. Crossing. We didn't do many seated shapes today. Huh. Wow. Okay. Seems like that has sometimes doesn't always occur. So when we find the upright spine, feel where the back muscles feed back into the hip bones and lift up the hands to balance in front of your heart. Let the brain bow down into the space behind your heart. And take just a mini moment here to experience the collective, I guess the awareness of the teachings that come into practicing together. And breathing and wellness.